This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include political consultant Doug Raymond, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, syndicated columnist John Hood, and political activist and chairman of the Wake County Democratic Party, Dan Blue III. Well, this week our program is going to discuss the issue of government taking private property, a looming fight over ways to create jobs and improve our economy, and why so many classrooms are empty during spring break makeup days. Let's get started. When a government takes property owners' land, the process is called eminent domain. Citing examples of government abuse, several bills have been introduced to ensure property owners are treated fairly. One would repeal the MAP Act, which we talked about several years ago, a 1987 law that identified land to be used at some future date in road building. Another would speed up the process of paying property owners when DOT used eminent domain. Chris, DOT says this bill's only going to increase the cost of building roads at a time when we already don't have enough money to provide for transportation. Supporters say it's going to make sure government behaves when it takes people's land. What do you think?
Well, I don't think we should conflate the two, really. If I think the abuse of the MAP Act and the court decision that came down, I hope gave legislators little choice. You can't hold somebody's property and hold a possible road over their head while their value of their property goes down. That's why these bills are passing close to unanimously. The big issue is, how do you be reasonable about it? There are times when government and progress and roads have to be built. There obviously are private property rights that people have. I think the scale has tipped too far towards the Department of Transportation, especially in that MAP Act case near Winston-Salem. So it's a little weird to hear the Department of Transportation worried about their road costs going up when we should be worried about adequately compensating people, giving them notice, not having strings on their property. There's a way to do this, but it shouldn't be worrying about how much the road costs.
Well, John, it does present a bit of a conundrum to the extent that if you're going to be planning throughways, major roads, you got to have some advanced planning years ahead in many instances, because it takes that period of time to make sure you get it all connected and get the right-of-ways and all that kind of stuff. The case in question is that they took so doggone long and tied up property owners' land. Is there a middle ground here?
I suppose there is a middle ground in the sense that, yes, eminent domain will be used, and yes, there may even be gaps in time between when a road is planned and when the property is acquired, but it needs to be really quick. And it's important to remember that to respect the property rights of the homeowners in question, the property owners in question, is not to increase the cost of the road construction. The cost is there. The question is who bears it. If you force somebody to hold land in abeyance or to be unable to do anything with it for years and years and years, you're imposing the cost of building the road on them, and they're not responsible for the cost of building the road. Everybody is responsible as taxpayers, and that needs to be clearly and quickly shouldered by the state.
But of course, the problem comes down to if you take it and declare this is going to be part of a roadway that's going to be built, it could be years. Property values could go down before DOT ever got a chance to exercise eminent domain, couldn't it, Doug? Because under the circumstances, the property owner couldn't do anything with it.
Exactly, and that's the whole point, is when you hear these stories about these property owners that are just handcuffed because, of course, some people say, oh, there's a road coming through there that'll help your property. Somebody will want to put a gas station. We've traveled the roads of North Carolina. There's a long distance between exits. If you were going to be in an exit, It might be a good spot, so that helps. The two things I think are interesting in this, having years on the local level dealing with eminent domain, it's amazing how many people don't even realize that that's the law. And number two, as we read all these discussions about the conflict between Governor McCrory and the Senate, this is one issue where Governor McCrory and the Senate are on the same page and against what the House's plan is.
And Dan, part of what's going on here is the process that another aspect and another bill that's involved in this is trying to get the DOT to go ahead and pay up when a jury awards a higher price and make sure that they're paying this property owner interest from the time that jury awards a higher price until he actually gets paid. This is indicating that perhaps maybe DOT is hedging a little bit in their payments. Would you agree?
That's what it sounds like, and I think what everyone has reached agreement on here is that if the government's going to take the property, it needs to pay a fair value. It needs to do it quickly. It can't hedge its bets. It can't wait out the market and see whether prices go up or down. It needs to make a decision and commit to it. It's as simple as that.
Another issue that came up that was unrelated to these two bills, Chris, was regarding the ability of adjacent property owners to be able to require a three-fourths vote majority of a city council before a property could be rezoned. Why was this bill proposed? Is it a good idea?
Well, this one gives me pause, and I think you could argue this either way in terms of the property owners' rights, but Representative Stam believes that it's too difficult for developers to make decisions, and that too few property owners have a say in it, and that the threshold is too high on the city council, although there was an amendment by Republican Marilyn Avila to, instead of having a 3/4 vote of the city council, to make it 2/3. That amendment was defeated. This is a fascinating split on this bill. It's not a partisan issue necessarily. I think 4 Republicans in Wake County voted against the bill that Representative Stam proposed. It's another example. I think it's going too far, and it's giving developers too much power.
Well, I was getting ready to say, though, Doug, there's a feeling that a handful of adjacent property owners could be tying up your individual rights as far as what you can do with your property. And so we need to level the playing field a little bit here.
No, I think that's exactly right, and I'll just reiterate what Dan said. The biggest thing is that once your property kind of comes under that cloud of it may be taken, the offer needs to be made and settled and needs to go, because your property's a totally different ballgame once they put that label on it.
Well, if you like NC Spin and you want more, you be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or NC Spin on Facebook. We've got exclusive video footage you can't get anywhere else. Plus, you can read perspectives from opinion leaders across our state. Get more balanced debate from the Old North State on ncspin.com or NC Spin on Facebook or at NC Spin Tweets. When we come back after these messages, different means for economic development.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
The Legal Workforce Act is a bad idea. Forcing mandatory E-Verify before creating a 21st century guest worker program is bad for agriculture, and it's bad for our economy. Wasting crops, closing farms, and importing our food are not acceptable consequences. We expect better. We must solve our current workforce needs first. Tell Congress to fix our broken immigration system the right way.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
Every year, North Carolina patients undergo 635,000 same-day surgeries. 72% of these surgeries are performed in our highest-cost hospital facilities, adding as much as $2,000 to every procedure. The state's outdated Certificate of Need law prevents competition from lower-cost, higher-quality same-day surgery centers, inflating healthcare costs and limiting patient choice. Tell state lawmakers it's time to lower healthcare costs now. It's time to make a simple fix to an outdated law, increasing patient choice and lowering healthcare costs now. You can help. Visit reformconnow.com and tell lawmakers it's time for a simple fix to an outdated law. It's time to lower healthcare costs now.
We now return to NC Spin.
The divisiveness in Raleigh is becoming more apparent as the session progresses. The House passed an economic development bill, but Senate leadership immediately assigned it to the Senate Rules Committee, the burial ground from which little legislation is ever resurrected. Now the Senate's considering their own proposal, which differs in many ways, They appear unwilling to continue the JDIG grants that Governor McCrory says are essential because they say 86% of the current grants went to Wake, Durham, and Mecklenburg counties. Instead, they want to restrict those grants based on a county's population. They want to lower corporate income taxes and confine those taxes to a company's sales instead of payroll and property value. I want to ask all the panelists, this war of words is getting heated. Governor McCrory proclaimed the Senate bill would break the bank, meaning it would further decrease state revenues. Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger says McCrory was the big spender because he dramatically increased this JDIG spending the first 2 years of his administration, and most of it went to those 3 counties. I want to ask what you think of it. Doug, I'm going to start with you.
Well, it's just, I would say it's fascinating, but it's not good government the way it's playing out. First of all, you're exactly right, and sometimes people have, they try to say, oh, I've never seen anything like this. There's always been infighting, but there has been a few things in the last few weeks I've never seen. I got a press release the other day from the Senate communications director. It didn't even have the letterhead on it. They were so anxious to get out and rebut what the governor had said. It was like a personal, it was like, hey, he said this, we want to say this. But the big picture, what I'm trying to tell people that ask me is, one of the things that I think all sides concerned aren't doing is, you have to realize the personality, both individually and collectively, of who you're dealing with. And if you've watched the Republican Senate caucus operate over the last few years, you're not going to sway them by, comments in the media or getting somebody to give them phone calls on tax credits and things like that. You're going to have to negotiate with them behind closed doors, not in the media.
Chris, what do you take on this?
Well, I don't disagree with that. I think part of it is the Governor McCrory still hasn't appeared to master sort of the back room, and I usually think that's a bad thing, and it is sometimes, but in terms of the negotiating behind the scenes, lining things up, working with his allies, using the pressure and the power of his office that we don't see every day. A lot of these things, these are battles being waged in the media, and sometimes it's literally hard to remember that they're in the same political party. I mean, this is the same way they talked about Governor Perdue, the same way that the Democrats talked about Republican governors in the past. It's just unusual because they're all in the same party. The war of words is escalating. The governor blasted the Senate proposal to change the way sales tax are allocated late in mid this past week, so it looks like it's continuing and there's no end in sight.
John, what's your take?
Well, I agree that there are severe political differences. Some of them are quite petty. But these are also philosophical and policy differences. The House and the Senate's bills on economic development are quite different. And you can kind of see both sides. The senator's argument is, if we're going to do incentives, and remember, both sides say they're reluctant to do incentives in the first place,
right,
and that they're just doing it because everybody else is. You have to be competitive. The Senate's argument is, if we're going to do it, at the very least we ought to limit the bulk of the spending to distressed areas, and most of the money's going to the urban areas. And the House says, yeah, but these are where companies want to go, so it's not a question of whether a company goes to Wake County or Rutherford County. It's going to go to Wake County or Gwinnett County, Georgia, or something. So there are real policy differences. Don't chalk this up entirely to personality conflicts.
Dan, what's your take?
Well, I agree with everything that's been said. One, I think it's fascinating, and two, I do think that there's a philosophy difference that we're watching here as we try to decide whether the money's supposed to follow the growth or whether the money's supposed to go where it's most needed. And you see that sort of as we sprinkle money across the state and as people argue about what the needs are and what the direction should be for that money.
Doug, so far as it goes, sort of from a macro point of view, the politics, Governor McCrory and former House Speaker Tillis teamed up together quite frequently during the last 2 years. Now we've got Speaker Moore. Do you think that's going to happen again? Are we going to see that same kind of liaison taking place between the Speaker and the Governor? And which House seems to have the upper hand in bargaining?
Well, I think initially there was a lot of the armchair quarterbacks were saying that it's going to take Speaker Moore a little time to get his feet underneath him. I think he's hit the ground running and done a pretty good job, but I just think the dynamics are this. You've got a governor who's got to run a statewide campaign. You've got House members whose districts are a lot less secure and they're a lot more varied than the Senate. They're going to have to be a little bit more flexible and a little bit more moderate than the Senate, and I think that's where a lot of the teaming up comes from.
All right, we're going to take a break. We're not finished with this topic yet, and so we're going to take a break and come back. I want to talk some more about this after these messages.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Where do you go when you need to know? ANC makes it easy for you to get the information you need to make well-informed public policy decisions. Our members are industry leaders who are ready to share their industry-specific insights with you. Want to hear both sides of the story? ANC members can tell you. Just use the ANC member directory as your guide or call us directly. ANC members have the knowledge, expertise, and perspective you need to create public policies that are good for North Carolina. We are ready for your call.
The Medicaid system is not a perfect system. There are things that could be changed, but there's a lot that's going well with the system. Community Care of North Carolina is in place. It's a team of nurses, advisors, caregivers who help us out. We want to call and say, look, I've got Miss So-and-so here. She needs to have her weight checked each day because she's got congestive heart failure. Can you send one of those monitors out to the house and keep an eye on this and let me know if her weight goes up too much, because if it does, she's retaining fluid and she's going to be back in the hospital. We work together with them. That's a great system. It saves a lot of money. It's proven to work. We're not opposed to changing the things that need to be changed, but let's not throw out everything that we worked for the past 15 to 20 years.
North Carolina's Family Physicians supports Medicaid reform that builds on our state's foundation of medical homes. OurNCHealthcare.com.
Does your North Carolina business or organization have a story to tell? I'm Richard Campbell, and at Carolina Broadcasting and Publishing, we help tell stories that connect you to the people who will respond. We take the time to understand our clients' needs and what makes them unique. We craft their stories through the efficient use of words, images, and videos that resonate with their desired audience. We also know that a good story is incomplete without a call to action. On video, on air, online, and in print, from concept to final production, no one can help tell your story more effectively or affordably than we can. For special introductory offers, visit carolinabroadcasting.com or call 919-832-1416. Again, that's carolinabroadcasting.com. Let us help tell your story today.
We now return to NC Spin.
I want to continue our discussion about different means for economic development. Dan, back when tax reform was the big issue, back in 2013, the Senate and the House passed tax reform. They said very clearly they wanted to reduce corporate tax rates to 4% and then even to 3%, but we had to meet certain revenue goals. Well, we obviously didn't meet those goals. Now the Senate's saying they still want to reduce those corporate tax rates. It's resulted, that's really part of what resulted in the war of words between McCrory and Berger, because McCrory says it's going to cost $500 million in revenues to the state. Who's right and wrong here?
Well, I'll actually have to go with the governor on this. I think the Senate's being a little irresponsible. Even as they're taking money out of the coffers, they're pitting counties against each other, arguing over the leftovers. And that's actually exacerbating this rural-urban divide that we've got here, and it's all over money.
John, I thought it was fascinating this week. Roy Cordato from the Locke Foundation, I'm not sure, did you read that piece that he wrote? I
did.
Yeah, he said, you know, if you go back and look at the goals of the North Carolina Republican Party for so many years, they've been opposed to corporate giveaways, corporate handouts, and they've also been opposed to giving tax breaks to a few instead of the many, and yet this legislature is doing just exactly that. They're not Republicans anymore. What's your response to it?
Well, I think Roy makes a good point, and he is, among other things, a scholar of public choice theory. Public choice theory tells us that if you want to understand why legislators or members of Congress or mayors or anybody else take certain actions, don't just listen to what they say. Look at what they do, what their incentives are, and in this case, there are always going to be strong lobbyists representing a few large entities that have a lot to gain from making a change. The costs are distributed among lots and lots of people, maybe the entire population, and they're not as adequately represented in front of a legislative body. So that's part of the problem. But there's a philosophical divide, and there's even a question of prudence. Most Republicans like to cut taxes as much as possible, as soon as possible. So the dispute about the corporate income tax or other tax reductions is not whether it's a good idea, it's a question of prudence. When is it a good idea? The biggest challenge we've got in North Carolina fiscally right now is basically neither. There's a lobby for spending more money, and there is a lobby for cutting taxes. And there isn't a lobby for what I actually think is the highest priority, which is don't do anything. Save money.
I was going to lead to the fact you wrote a column this week saying they ought to put more money in the rainy day fund.
The bottom line is that that we've had a long time without a recession. I don't think the recovery's been very strong, but it's been lengthy. So history tells us that in the not too distant future, we will either have a major natural disaster or a recession or both. And it would be nice to have $1.5 billion in the rainy day fund, and we've only got $600 million. That's not enough. We need to save money this year so we can safeguard the tax cuts we've already enacted.
Doug, what about this business of giving 86% to 3 counties? Someone alluded to the fact you can't force a corporation to go to a county that they don't want to go to. But on the other hand, if you're living in one of the other 97 counties in North Carolina that's not getting these funds, you don't think this is fair. Now, the Senate says they want to spread this out. They want to make this even. How's that going to work in economic development?
Well, you just said on the other hand, you have us on here to be opinionated, but this is one thing that you can really see both sides of the argument on this. What I find fascinating about this, and it goes back to the incentive package, the sales tax, all of it, this is becoming an urban versus rural type of thing. And we mentioned the governor versus Senator Berger. Senator Harry Brown is leading the train on a lot of this stuff, and he's an up-and-comer in the Senate, and of course from Onslow County, representing that urban. If you look at all the leaders in the Senate, the vast majority of them are from rural areas, and that's, I think, where you're seeing a lot of this policy coming from.
So we got a stalemate going on here, Chris, between the governor, the House, and the Senate. Who's going to prevail? What do you think the compromise is going to be?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think the Senate, passed a bill this week to put $5 million more in the JDIG fund, which is not nearly what the governor wants. But I guess that would answer the questions of losing a project immediately. I think this debate probably won't be resolved until the budget is passed sometime in the summer. It might all be written into the budget. I think
But is that going to be time enough for Governor McCrory to get the money he needs? He says he's got 3 big fish on the line.
Former Secretary Decker said in August that we were out of money, we were losing projects. And then she said in October we were out of money, we were losing projects. McCrory said in December we have to pass it in the first 2 weeks of the session. It's going to be April next week, and we still haven't passed it. So that's one of the things that's so frustrating is I'm not sure who to believe. And if all these projects were in the pipeline in August, did we lose them all? I don't even know.
Well, here's what you can believe. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Hi, I'm Linda Loveland. I want the best for my kids. Feeding them foods they like within my budget is a priority. But what do we really know about these foods? North Carolina farmers and food experts give you a website to find it all. FeedTheDialogueNC.com, a place where moms like you and me can learn more about the foods we eat and the farmers that feed us. Check it out. Add your input and help feed the dialogue. Let's talk food at FeedTheDialogueNC.com.
Nobody ever imagined a mammogram machine being subject to CON law. If I want to invest our business dollars into technology that I think is going to benefit my patients, my customers, we should be able to do that. I think it's time to take a law that was intended to protect the citizens of North Carolina and now is harming them and change it. I'm Dr. Bruce Schroeder, and I support CON reform.
Visit reformconnow.com.
I was asked by someone months ago, isn't Medicaid in North Carolina broken? And my answer was no. There are parts of it that need to be improved. There are parts that need to be changed. But the whole system's not broken. There are a lot of things that are working very well. What is working well is that we have a physician-led, physician-guided team effort. It's built on the concept of physicians having medical homes, patients having medical homes. And that system that we've created in North Carolina has done wonderful work. It has saved money, it's improved quality, and we have data that demonstrates that. That's what we need to retain, that's what we need to build upon. We don't need to replace that.
North Carolina's Family Physicians supports Medicaid reform that builds on our state's foundation of medical homes.
OurNCHealthcare.com.
We now return to NC Spin.
All right, now it's time for one of our favorite parts of the show when we ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Dan Blue, we'll start with you.
Sure. We had an unfortunate and horrific accident in Raleigh earlier this week when the scaffolding on a construction site plummeted, causing 3 people to lose their lives and 1 to be seriously injured. As the reports are coming in, it looks like the company, the subcontractor responsible for the scaffolding, had numerous violations in the past. This is a good opportunity for the Department of Labor to get involved, take a good look at what's going on these construction sites, both in terms of safety and in terms of employee wages and whether they're getting paid or not, what they're supposed to be getting paid.
Interesting. John Hood, tell us something we don't know.
This is a prediction that I offered painfully. I don't like to say this.
I already like it.
Well, there you go. I don't think you're going to like this. I believe that sometime within the next 10 years, we're going to see 4, 5, maybe 6 private colleges in North Carolina go under.
Wow.
Particularly if they cannot adjust to online, if they cannot aggressively and efficiently offer online learning opportunities, and if they can't save themselves with international students. The rationale for a lot of these schools is slipping away, and I think we're going to see some significant changes.
Chris, tell us something we don't know.
Well, we spend a lot of time on this show predicting or thinking, talking about who might run for what and in what year. 2016 is coming up, and the person that everywhere I go, people ask me who's going to run against Richard Burr, who's going to run for lieutenant governor of the Democratic side, whatever it is. I haven't been at a place lately where the name Jeff Jackson hasn't come up. The first-term senator from Mecklenburg County, I guess he's a little bit more than a first-term. He replaced Dan Clodfelter. I'm not saying he's going to run for any of those jobs, but he's already making a name for himself. He was sort of celebrated for his social media during the ice storm. He gave a speech last year that went viral on the Senate floor. He's an Afghan war veteran, a former prosecutor. He's really an up and rising star. If he doesn't run in 2016 for something else, I'll be shocked if he doesn't run the next time around.
Yeah, he of YouTube fame.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Doug Raymond, tell us something we don't know.
Well, we've been talking a lot about the partisan bickering going on. But last week, there was a good piece of bipartisan legislation that didn't get a lot of attention, but it's going to affect a lot of people, and that was the electricity's buyout. And this is going to affect people's electric bills come the end of the summer, beginning of winter, and it's going to be very important. And also kind of going along with Chris's note, the senator who spearheaded that was Senator Buck Newton out of Wilson. His name's been thrown around a lot for a possible attorney general candidate. I don't think his political star is going to be any brighter than it is right now with that electricity's deal, and I think you may hear an announcement very soon from him.
Interesting. All right, good political news. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback and read our weekly column. Be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. We hope you'll join us next week when NC Spin will have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.